All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am back, and we are about ready to now start our demo. Now, just up front, normally I would cook my chili in a pot like this, tall, narrow, but I found that if I do that, because of the camera, you're not going to be able to see inside, okay? So I'm going to switch pots, but normally I would use a smaller stock pot like this to make my chili in. I just like the fact that it's a little higher, and it kind of a narrower opening, less evaporation when I'm cooking. But I'm gonna choose today to use that Dutch oven right there instead. And the reason for it is so that, again, you have the benefit of being able to see inside of it. So that is what I'm choosing to use. Either one of them will work. You won't have an issue with either one. So I guess it's really more personal preference. Okay, so I've added my 2 tablespoons of oil that the recipe calls for. I'm just using a light olive oil, but any oil will work. I have my spoon handy, and I've got all my ingredients as well handy. Now, the one thing that I want to do is I want to take my tomatoes, and the recipe calls for crushed tomatoes. I don't have crushed tomatoes, I just have diced tomatoes in my house. So I'm just going to do that with an immersion blender, or what's called a stick blender. So I'm just going to plug that in real quick. I'm going to go on low. Where's the... And I'm just going to give them a quick little puree, just to crush them up a little bit. That's it. That's all I have to do. You could also do that in a blender if you chose, but that works just fine. So I wanted to get that out of the way. Pardon my reach. All right. So now I have my crushed tomatoes over here. All right. I got my wooden spoon. I got my towel. And my first step is going to be browning my ground beef. Okay. So my ground beef is added. I do want to season it a little bit. So I'm going to add approximately 1 teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of black pepper. Okay, so let's recap. We got our pan, we preheated it, we added our oil, we waited for that oil to get hot, and we were able to tell because it just started to come to the smoke point, and then we added our ground beef, lightly seasoned with salt and pepper. About 1 teaspoon of each initially. We may have to add a little more later if we need to, but we want the ground beef as well to be flavored. So we're just going to kind of monitor our heat. My suggestion as far as how to break up the ground beef, I do that with a spoon. You could do it with a potato masher. You could do it with a fork. You don't really necessarily have to do it at all. I mean, it just depends on you and what your particular liking is. If you like larger pieces of ground beef in your chili, you know, don't break it up so much. If you like a smaller, more homogeneous kind of chili, break it up a little more. It's really just up to you. Same thing with ground beef. You know, you could substitute ground chicken, ground turkey, ground pork, or a combination of any of those, ground beef and ground pork mixed together, ground chicken, ground turkey. You can make it just vegetarian and leave the ground beef out completely if you want. I'm using some ground beef that I had in my freezer. It was a 90-20, meaning it was 90% lean to 20% fat. So it's a little lower in fat than your average 80-20 ground beef. That's what you commonly would see at the store. 80-20 just indicates that it's 80% lean meat to 20% fat. So we're just going to sit and just kind of let this cook. Let some of that moisture cook away. There's a lot of water in here. One of my little bags kind of had I guess an opening in it, so when I was thawing it out, a little bit of water got in there. Okay, going to continue to cook that and let a lot of that water that's in there evaporate out. Kind of concentrate that flavor a little bit. Okay. I am going to give it a little taste, see if it needs any more salt or pepper. Maybe just a little. Little salt, about 1/4 teaspoon. And again, that's for me. And I'm going to add a little more pepper. You're going to have to kind of judge yours, everybody, by your taste. Okay. I wish I could tell you that, you know, making chili is a standardized recipe. It's not. You know, some people believe that chili should not contain beans. Excuse me. Others do. So that's one way. Break up the ground beef. Here's another. Like I said, it's a potato masher. And you can get in there and just kind of mash up the ground beef a little. And that really does, admittedly, make short work of it. So that's another way you can do it as well, too. Excuse me, everyone. All right. So the water's starting to evaporate out. Okay. Next up, I'm going to add two things. I'm going to first add my garlic. And I'm going to add my tomato paste. Okay. And that's about 4 ounces of tomato paste. I have a 6-ounce can. And I used about 2/3 of it. Alright, so now I'm going to mix in my garlic and my tomato paste. And there's a reason I'm adding my tomato paste. Now, I want it to kind of brown a little bit. Kind of caramelize the bottom. Enrich the flavor and the overall color as well too. It'll make it a nice, richer, darker color. Alright, so it might be a little hard to see with all the steam, but I got my tomato paste in there, my garlic. I'm just gonna kind of cook that until I can start to smell the aroma from those tomatoes or that tomato paste. Okay. All right. Smells great. Okay, next thing. My onions and my peppers. So, I'm going to add my onions. And my peppers. And I'm going to turn my heat down now. And I am thinking, now that I've got everything in here, at some point I'm going to have to transfer this into my bigger stock pot. But at least you can kind of see into this one initially, because again, that big stock pot, it would just been too difficult for you to be able to see the bottom of the stock pot to see what's happening, you know, to the ground beef and such. Okay, so we're gonna slowly cook this. Until those onions start to become translucent. I've turned my heat down to about halfway at this point. Excuse me. And really the last things to do are to add my tomato product and my beans to the pot, along with my dry seasonings, my oregano, chili powder, a little bit of cumin, smoked paprika, and probably a little more salt and pepper as well too at this point. But I want to continue to cook this for about another 5 minutes. Till those onions become translucent. Okay, so now would be a good time to kind of catch up on your notes, because this is just going to cook slowly for 5 minutes. Okay. Definitely going to need a bigger pot. So I'm going to take a moment and transfer this over into this. So it's probably going to come, you know, up to about right there. Where I'm afraid if I add my tomato product and my beans, it's going to come right up to there. And that won't really give me a whole lot of room, but we'll see. I'll put it in there, and I don't know, if I need to transfer it, I can transfer it over. All right, next step. I like to, as it's now starting to cook, it's been just under 5 minutes or so. Onions are becoming translucent. I like to add my seasonings. Okay, so your recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of cumin. Sorry, 2. I am only going to use 1 because I like cumin, but I like it tastefully. You certainly feel free, you know, to add as much or as little as you'd like. Okay, then it also calls for oregano, 2 teaspoons. And that's about as much as I think I have left in here. Yep. So there's my oregano. And my chili powder. And as I mentioned, I'm going to add a little bit of paprika. I'm using a smoked paprika. So I'm going to add 1, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, and then chili powder. 3 to 4 tablespoons of chili powder. So there's 1,